Welcome to part 2 in the Small Unit Leadership Accelerator. In this segment, I will give you my top piece of advice that took me 10 years to discover. It's so important that I want you to have it before almost anything else I have to offer. If you're looking to level up your leadership credibility, you are in the right place. Thanks very much for investing time into making yourself a better leader. The better you are at leading, the better we are at winning. Before proceeding further with leading your platoon, I need to talk to you about risk. In this section, I will introduce the risk transfer machine and a simple 5-step risk transfer process. We all know that the platoon commander is accountable for everything the platoon does or fails to do. Obviously, this applies to leaders at all levels. As your boss, I'm most concerned about those things your unit will fail to do. Will you fail to take safety precautions and get a Marine killed? Will you accidentally damage some mission-critical equipment? Will your failure make your unit combat ineffective? Possible. But if I'm losing sleep over these things, then you better be up to your eyeballs in dealing with them, making them not be problems. But if bad things may or may not happen in the future, how can you know what they are, if they're actually going to happen, and what to do to prevent them? That's what operational risk management is for. This is not an ORM class. I will reinvent ORM training for you in another class, so stay tuned for that. But today we are going to get on the path to figuring out what risks are already mitigated and incorporating that mitigation in your unit's day-to-day ops. If there's a risk out there that Big Marine Corps already knows about, there's probably already a mitigation strategy as well. If you can tap into that, you can ultimately transfer those risks back to Headquarters Marine Corps and protect the unit and its leaders. This is episode 2. To start to understand the gravity of the accountability placed on the platoon commander, it's smart to just start jotting down a list of all the bad things that could happen in a platoon over the course of a year. The platoon commander is accountable. Marines do inherently dangerous work. We shoot weapons, we drive vehicles, we operate forklifts, we produce and use electricity, we lift heavy objects, we lay in concertina wire, etc. Minor injuries happen and are expected. Obviously, injuries are bad, but in terms of operational effectiveness, the benefits of training and operating outweigh the cost in terms of occasional cuts, scrapes, bruises, twisted ankles. Equipment gets used in austere and dangerous environments. Equipment breaks due to normal wear and tear. It's expected. But the accountability placed on Marine officers is meant to protect the viability of Marines and equipment to deploy and operate in combat. Severe negligence leading to the loss of Marines and equipment is always the commander's fault. So what could go wrong, leading to the loss of viability of Marines and equipment to deploy and operate in combat? The more serious ones include vehicle rollover, fall injury, electrocution, demolitions accident, fatal negligent discharge, drowning incident, heat stroke, etc. If you've been in the military for 5 minutes, you know that leaders at all levels jump and scream to try to drill it into your head to put safety first. Many have personally witnessed catastrophic mishaps like this. Many more have heard about them from friends, mentors, and reports of investigation. It's serious. But those are just the catastrophic mishaps. We also care a lot about the many lesser but still operationally relevant incidents, such as loss of mission essential equipment like weapons, crypto, optics, etc., and widespread maintenance issues like inability to start vehicle engines, several flat tires in the motor pool, rusty weapons, lost equipment, SL3 components, etc. Personnel and training readiness can similarly impact the viability of the unit to deploy and operate in combat. Are Marines trained as independent operators on their MOSs? Is the work environment as safe as it can be given the inherent hazards? Does a Marine have a pay or force preservation issue that interferes with his livelihood and deployability? Does a Marine have a chronic injury that isn't getting better? Does someone have a drug problem that affects their ability to do work in a hazardous environment? Is there toxic leadership that affects the unit's cohesion? Is someone a security risk according to the 13 adjudicated factors? In each and every one of these examples related to equipment and personnel, failure to maintain unit readiness is the responsibility of the commander. So the commander must therefore manage the risk of them interfering with unit readiness. This is where the risk transfer machine comes in. Anyone who's received operational risk management training knows there are 4 ways to manage a risk. You can avoid a risk. This is rarely possible if you intend to train and operate. You can accept a risk, but it's the general opinion of mid-grade and senior leaders that a new lieutenant is not yet experienced enough to accept many risks. I want you to get to where you know what risks you can accept, but you really need to have that conversation with your boss. So I'll sidestep that topic for now. Third, you can mitigate a risk by exercising forethought and ingenuity in determining and placing controls. This is the essence of ORM, but in this segment, I want to teach you the power of transferring risk. As it turns out, the Marine Corps has spent generations building an elaborate and extensive risk transfer machine. What? A risk transfer machine? A machine that transfers risk? Yes, bear with me. I'm mostly talking about the bureaucracy of Big Marine Corps. For all of its negative connotation, the truth is that this bureaucracy generates a lot of knowledge that is very powerful for the new platoon commander or staff NCO who otherwise possesses relatively little experience. So many risk mitigations and controls have been constructed and put into writing already. They are out there waiting to get applied to risky situations. They emerged from experience of people who have seen mishaps, equipment failures, and security breaches happen firsthand. There isn't enough time in a junior officer's career to experience the breadth of mishaps necessary to gain the foresight to mitigate these risks in the inherently hazardous environment. But Marine Corps orders, policy, instructions, and manuals are written with a collective experience of career subject matter experts in each of their functional areas, including safety, supply, maintenance, arms and ammunitions and explosives, fuel, motor transportation, electrical equipment systems, information systems, cybersecurity, administration, personnel security, physical security, training, and many more. Everything we know about how to get Marines everywhere to work, train, and operate safely and predictably in these functional areas, it's written in these publications. Now, I have to say this, I have a love-hate relationship with bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is the tool of large organizations to wield a large and minimally trained workforce to obtain predictable results. And let's be honest, new lieutenants and many new staff NCOs and below are a minimally trained workforce. Bureaucracy places controls and procedures to make sure basic decisions made by the workforce are generally correct. Not efficient, but generally correct. The downside is that bureaucracy often supersedes and ultimately stifles the creativity and flexibility of small unit leaders and their people. This is natural tension against the Marine Corps cultural imperative to decentralize, delegate authority, and empower decision-making and creativity to the lowest level. However, there is enormous risk transfer power in these bureaucratic controls and procedures that junior leaders would be foolish to ignore outright. In the day-to-day operation of a platoon, there are many perhaps unknowable things that could happen that could gradually or suddenly degrade the viability of the platoon to deploy or operate. However, if mishaps, incidents, malicious behavior, negligence, or security failures occur on your watch, you can either accept all accountability and consequences, or you can transfer risk of and accountability for mishaps back to Headquarters Marine Corps. Transferring the risk requires the platoon commander to do the following. You and your Marines know the Marine Corps order, which provides procedures for the functional area. Your platoon SOP is aligned with those procedures in writing, and you enforce those procedures in practice. In the command investigation following a mishap, the investigator will be armed with the full knowledge of the Marine Corps orders and will interview your Marines to find out if they knew and understood the relevant parts. It's not enough for the platoon commander to simply know the order and its procedures and to write them in an SOP. Your Marines must also have practical understanding of what the order is and its procedures mean in their day-to-day job. Failing to do each part results in the platoon commander's inability to transfer accountability back to Headquarters Marine Corps. So while there are uncontrollable hazards in military operations like enemy fire, there are also many controllable hazards that the platoon commander may simply not have experience enough yet to mitigate. Reduce the platoon's risks for which the platoon commander must accept down to the minimum necessary to train and operate. For all others, don't wait for something bad to happen to gain experience and then place a control over that hazardous activity after the fact. The mishap could have led to death, disability, or loss of mission essential equipment and, in turn, loss of viability of the platoon to deploy and operate. Instead, read and understand the Marine Corps orders and policies and adopt them into your written unit procedures to transfer risk and accountability back to Headquarters Marine Corps. This is the most powerful benefit that the Marine Corps bureaucracy provides to the Marine leader who must be accountable. One final emphasis on what else the risk transfer machine provides to the small unit leader, that is knowledge. The expertise of Marine Corps subject matter experts are simplified and made transferable to you and your Marines in the Marine Corps orders and policies. Included in that knowledge are sets of procedures to help you mitigate and control an expansive range of risks. You may not know all the pain experienced by those that came before you, but you can benefit from the rules of thumb that were captured in those procedures. With this knowledge, you can provide to your Marines your added leadership value. With ingenuity and circumspectness, you can tailor the procedures to best apply to your platoon's unique situation. This is the first time in which the platoon commander can safely innovate, with eyes wide open about the risks and their potential controls. Prior to this point, Avoiding bureaucracy was not cavalier, it was recklessly or lazily accepting unnecessary risk. During the rest of this volume in the training series, we will go over the billet holders that will help us manage this knowledge. But for now, let us continue to draw out the risk transfer process. It starts by understanding the Marine Corps orders, which are applicable to your platoon's mission, situation, and organization. I will provide a good foundation here in this series, but there's no way for us to cover them all in this venue. It's up to platoon leadership to eventually become familiar with everything applicable. Once you find the relevant Marine Corps orders or policy references, step 2 is really to skip all the administrative paragraphs that don't really apply at the platoon level. There's often a lot of information about how Headquarters Marine Corps manages the functional area that doesn't really help small unit leaders operate and mitigate risk. It's my observation that the massive, irrelevant administrative paragraphs often create a barrier to which junior leaders don't possess the fortitude to read through, and thus they never get to the relevant stuff. Junior leaders should go directly from step 1 to step 3 and read the paragraphs applicable to unit commanders. In this case, the order is pointing to 05 commanders and above, but even at the higher levels, information in these paragraphs usually has direct applicability to company levels and below. In many other cases, the Marine Corps order or policy will have paragraphs that further describe roles, responsibilities, and tasks specifically for units below the 05 or battalion level. Take special care to read and understand these paragraphs. Also take note if there are pointers to the references that are also authoritative and also helpful to platoon leadership. So once you've found, read, and now understand the knowledge of the order or policy, consider how it applies to your platoon's unique mission and organization. This is your leadership value added. Then in your capacity as a small unit leader, give a Marine stewardship over that functional area. This is step 4. Judge whether it's a Marine's full-time job or perhaps it only requires 1 hour per week. In all cases, write down the work in their billet description. Make it part of their evaluation criteria when you or your staff in COIC are counseling them and judging their promotability. Hold them accountable to do the work described in there. Give them authority to direct the platoon's activities to make sure the platoon complies with the spirit of the Marine Corps order or policy. Get their buy-in and empower them to help shape the platoon SOP. This is step 5. Take the knowledge of the Marine Corps order or policy and apply it to the platoon's mission and organization, and the most common way to do that is through a written SOP, which leads to step 6. The leadership team needs to train the platoon on the SOP and supervise implementation of the SOP in day-to-day operations. By Marines throughout the platoon knowing, understanding, and practicing procedures drawn from authoritative orders and policy, they are, in effect, preventing most hazards and operational risks from occurring and impacting the platoon's operational readiness. Further, as long as the procedures are followed, the platoon commander can rest assured that should a now unlikely mishap or loss occur, that compliance with the orders will protect them from some or all liability. So in closing, I will say this. Most Marine Corps platoon leadership teams fall into one of these 3 categories. 1, reckless and willfully ignorant of policies because they don't like to be constrained by bureaucracy. 2, earnest about accomplishing the mission, but due to a lack of time, energy, and or experience, they are ignorant of risks and ignorant of the policies which mitigate those risks. 3 is the most rare, but it's the best, in which the platoon leadership team has reflected upon the knowledge of the policies, has adapted the policies to the platoon's unique arrangement of personnel and mission requirements, and now tailors in an appropriate range of procedures and uses delegations of responsibility to find that sweet spot and flexibility to train and operate, but within a safer and more risk-tolerant boundaries. Before concluding, I want to give you one of my top book recommendations for leaders at all levels, but especially at the beginning of a career in leadership. How do you feel about receiving criticism? Is it painful? Does it hurt your ego? For the beginning to the middle of your career in leadership, your basic competence and contributions will get you promoted to the rank of major or gunnery sergeant. However, it gets quite a bit more difficult once you're trying to become a lieutenant colonel or a first sergeant. That's because it takes something extra to get promoted at that point. It's very possible that you become a major or master sergeant while maintaining toxic traits. If you spent your whole career with toxic traits and you still get promoted, you may think that you'll get promoted again because of those traits. The truth is that you've plateaued and you will not rise again. Want to know why? It's because you've become unteachable. You don't take criticism seriously, or you don't tolerate criticism at all. You get offended by criticism, you whine about it, you hold a grudge, you retaliate. The book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith, will teach you the power of inviting critical feedback so you can grow. It talks mostly about how narcissistic managers don't become executive leaders because of their toxic traits. It then endorses 360-degree feedback as a powerful method to get candid feedback from anyone who will give it, but especially those most impacted by your toxic traits, your subordinates. So I want you to read it so you'll create a habit to welcome 360-degree feedback, ditch your ego, and foster a team-building command climate. I spent way too much of my career with too much fear of others pointing out my flaws. My ego couldn't handle it. I didn't grow as much as I could have. Now, after reading this book, I actively seek out 360-degree feedback, and it has done wonders for my professional and personal relationships. I read it way too late in my career, but that shouldn't stop you from putting this at the top of your reading list. I have a lot more to say about investing in relationships and making you and your team successful, but for now, you'll just have to stay tuned. In summary, during this segment, we discussed how to view military accountability in terms of risk management. We introduced a risk transfer machine, which essentially teaches small unit leaders to leverage Marine Corps knowledge down at the platoon level and the creation of smart standard operating procedures. Then to train and supervise the Marines in those procedures so risk of loss or mishap can be transferred back to the headquarters of Marine Corps where the procedures originated. And so this concludes part 2, but before you go, I want you to be the type of leader that is getting 1% better every day. One way to do that is to always be starving for 360-degree feedback. Get over your ego and don't be a coward about receiving critical feedback. Welcome it and use it to make you better. Say thank you when someone gives you a suggestion, even if it's completely bonkers. Giving psychological safety to someone who offers feedback is important for so many reasons, but especially if it can make you better. Your brains and the mission deserve your max potential. Just like you, I want to be 1% better every day. You deserve my max potential. So roast me in the comments. Tell me what to improve so this knowledge will get into more brains and make us better as a whole. Coming up next, what is a platoon commander's actual day job? Guess what? It's not all shooting guns and going on adventures. In the next episode, find out what are some of the typical roles, responsibilities, and expectations for the platoon commander. And I'll also share a ton of other concrete details needed to lead Marines at the platoon level. Stay tuned for this and more billet expectations for Marines in a typical platoon as we progress through the Small Unit Leadership Accelerator. Since you're serious about being a catalyst for your team's growth and success, I'll expect to see you there.